Before his death, Tab Hunter revealed a truth that Hollywood had spent decades trying to bury. To the world, he was the golden boy of the silver screen, handsome, charming, and adored by millions. But behind the carefully staged romances and dazzling smile lay a life shaped by fear, betrayal, and secrets too dangerous to share. In his final years, Hunter exposed the dark reality of what it meant to survive in Hollywood's golden age, a world where power ruled, image was everything, and love had to remain in the shadows. This is the untold story of Tab Hunter's hidden life and the secrets he refused to take to the grave.
You ever have depressions or spells of melancholy?
I'm unhappy right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you like girls?
Of course. But do we have time? This?
Before the world knew him as Tab Hunter, he was Arthur Kelm, born in July 1931 at a Manhattan hospital. His father came only once, staying just long enough to drop a Hershey's bar on the bed before disappearing forever. On the birth certificate, the doctor wrote only 2 words, male child. That was Arthur's beginning, fatherless, nameless, abandoned. His mother, Gertrude, a stern German immigrant, raised Arthur and his brother in a cramped Brooklyn apartment where the hum of her sewing machine filled the nights. But her heart was as cold as the winters outside. She never hugged her children, never said, "I love you." For Arthur, affection was something seen in films, not felt at home. As he grew, Arthur realized he was different, not because he disliked baseball or preferred books to games, but because of the quiet stirrings he felt when he saw another boy change his shirt in the locker room. At 12, he kissed a friend at church camp, a moment of innocent discovery that could have been cherished. Instead, it became a nightmare. A fellow camper told the nuns. Arthur was dragged into the courtyard and forced to kneel before the others. The head nun screamed at him, calling him a pervert, declaring his actions a sin of Satan. By nightfall, he was expelled, sent into the storm with no ride home. He walked 4 hours through pouring rain, soaked and broken, only to be met with his mother's cold rebuke. "Why did you bring such shame to me?" That shame became a scar he carried into his teenage years. He turned to the church for forgiveness, confessing his feelings at St. Francis. But instead of compassion, the priest slammed the door in his face, shouting, "Get out of God's house, you filthy creature." The message was clear. To survive, Arthur had to pretend. By day, he forced laughter at school, dodging the affection of girls he couldn't love. By night, he wrote forbidden dreams in a hidden notebook under his mattress. Some nights, the pain was unbearable. At 16, he stood on the edge of the Manhattan Bridge, staring at the icy water below, convinced that ending it was the only escape. But fate intervened. The wail of a passing police siren pulled him back from the edge. Arthur realized he couldn't give up, but he also couldn't be himself. From that night forward, he vowed to bury the truth. He would live in silence, no matter the cost. What he didn't know was that silence would one day follow him into the heart of Hollywood, where the dream he chased would become the stage for his greatest torment. By the late 1940s, Arthur Kelm was a quiet teenager searching for escape. Hollywood wasn't just a dream to him, it was a promise of reinvention, a place where he could leave behind the shame and loneliness of his childhood. At 18, fate intervened in the most unexpected way. One afternoon at a horse stable in Griffith Park, Arthur met a man who would change everything. Dick Clayton, a former actor turned Hollywood agent. Clayton looked at the shy, handsome boy and said the words that would rewrite Arthur's life. "You have the face of America." Through Clayton, Arthur was introduced to Henry Wilson, one of the most powerful and manipulative managers in Hollywood. Wilson was a kingmaker, the man behind stars like Rock Hudson and Troy Donahue. He knew exactly what he wanted, a boy who was beautiful, malleable, and hiding something. Arthur was the perfect candidate. In one meeting, Wilson stripped away his identity. Arthur Kelm was gone. In his place, A new name was crafted: Tab Hunter. Tab, like a bill waiting to be paid. Hunter, like a man chasing something he might never catch. Overnight, Arthur became a product, a label to be packaged and sold to the public. The transformation was immediate. Within 2 years, Tab Hunter's face was everywhere. On the covers of Photoplay, Modern Screen, and Life magazine. Semi-nude photos by swimming pools, staged dates with actresses like Natalie Wood, and carefully scripted interviews painted the image of a young man living every woman's fantasy. But behind the curtain, the cost was crushing. Henry Wilson controlled everything. Where Tab went, what he said, even how he stepped out of a car. Refusing meant career suicide. Worse, Wilson blurred the line between manager and manipulator. He would call in the middle of the night to demand details of Tab's private life, rifle through his personal letters, and threaten to expose him if he didn't comply. Hollywood had its new golden boy. But the boy himself was already trapped, forced to smile for the cameras while his real self was pushed deeper into the shadows. What the world saw was a rising star. What Tab lived in was a prison built from fear. At the height of his fame, Tab Hunter was paraded across magazine covers as the image of perfect masculinity. He was photographed with Natalie Wood, linked to Debbie Reynolds, and paired with every glamorous starlet Hollywood could find. To the world, he was the ultimate ladies' man. But behind closed doors, the truth was very different. Tab's real romances existed in silence, hidden from the cameras and concealed from the tabloids. One of the deepest was with actor Anthony Perkins, who would later achieve worldwide fame as Norman Bates in Psycho. They lived just a block apart in West Hollywood, often passing each other on the way to premieres, but they dared not walk together. By day they were acquaintances. By night they were something more: two men in love, bound by secrecy. Their relationship was tender but fragile, suffocated by fear of exposure. Hollywood was ruthless. Just one photograph, one whisper could destroy everything. That fear became reality when, in 1956, a photographer from Confidential magazine snapped a picture of the two leaving a restaurant. The image showed nothing more than a friendly pat on the shoulder, but it was enough. In January 1957, the magazine ran a suggestive article that pointed to Hunter without naming him outright. The fallout was immediate. Fans in conservative states protested his films. Theaters refused to hang his posters. Letters flooded Warner Brothers demanding they drop their golden boy if the rumors proved true. Behind the scenes, Henry Wilson went into crisis mode, paying hush money to tabloids and inventing a fake romance with a female magazine editor to distract the public. But for Tab, the damage had already been done. One evening, during a live performance on The Ed Sullivan Show, he was handed a folded note. It was from Anthony Perkins. Inside were just 7 words: "I can't do this anymore. They'll destroy us both." It was the end of their love story. Tab had been forced to choose between survival and happiness, and Hollywood made the choice for him. From that moment, every romance he had, whether fleeting or profound, carried the same cruel condition: it had to remain invisible. For years, Tab Hunter balanced on a razor's edge, projecting Hollywood's perfect leading man while shielding his truth from a world eager to tear him apart. But no secret in Hollywood stayed hidden forever. In 1952, Tab accepted an invitation to a small gathering in Walnut Park. To him, it was nothing more than a quiet night among friends. Actors, dancers, and musicians escaping the pressures of the spotlight. But it was a setup. For 2 weeks, police had been watching the house, tipped off by insiders hungry for scandal. Just before midnight, the raid began. Officers stormed the home, dragging Tab out of the kitchen as cameras flashed. He was charged, humiliated, and branded as a man unfit for the clean image Warner Brothers had spent years creating. The betrayal ran deeper than the police report. Soon, an ugly truth surfaced. His own manager, Henry Wilson, had struck a deal with Confidential magazine. To protect his bigger star, Rock Hudson, Wilson sacrificed Tab, feeding the tabloids rumors and stories to bury his clients' secrets. Tab was their scapegoat, served up as Hollywood's cautionary tale. The fallout was devastating. Confidential splashed headlines across the country, limpest pajama party exposed, pairing Hunter's name with whispered claims of affairs and lurid encounters. Radio stations reported on his disgrace. Movie theaters pulled his posters. Letters poured in by the thousands, demanding Warner Brothers cut him loose. Even those closest to him turned against him. Former lovers demanded hush money, threatening to sell his private letters to the press. Tab's savings drained away as he paid off blackmailers, desperate to keep pieces of his heart from being weaponized. Warner Brothers launched a frantic PR campaign, parading him with actresses at charity dinners and planting reassuring letters in fan magazines. But the damage was permanent. Hollywood had marked him as a liability, and directors who once praised him now whispered, "He's too big a risk." By the end of the 1950s, Tab Hunter's meteoric rise had collapsed into scandal, betrayal, and silence. The Golden Boy had become Hollywood's cautionary ghost. The boy who once graced every magazine cover, who was paraded as Hollywood's golden dream, suddenly found himself unwanted. After the scandals, the studios turned their backs. Warner Brothers quietly terminated his contract, handing him a $10,000 check and an envelope that symbolized the end of his career. No farewell party, no kind words, just silence, as he walked off the lot for the last time. The roles that once poured in vanished overnight. Paramount, Fox, and MGM all saw him as a liability. Instead of leading roles, Tab was relegated to B-movies, small theater productions, and one-off appearances that barely kept his name alive. The very press that once celebrated him now mocked him, feeding the public rumor after rumor. Tab fought to keep his head above water. He hosted small news segments in Palm Springs, performed in dinner theaters, and lent his voice to commercials. But the spotlight had dimmed. Each time he stepped outside, he forced a smile, hiding eyes that betrayed how much he had lost. In his memoir, he described this time simply, "I survived by shrinking, until no one remembered to hate me anymore." For a man who once represented America's brightest promise, obscurity became his only protection. But Hollywood has a strange way of circling back, just when it seemed the door had shut forever. An unlikely opportunity gave Tab a chance to step out of the shadows once more. By the late 1970s, Tab Hunter had become a ghost in Hollywood, present but invisible. He was the relic of a scandalized past, a man the industry had written off. Yet fate had one more twist to offer. In 1981, underground filmmaker John Waters reached out with an idea that shocked many. Pair Tab Hunter, the former heartthrob of America, with Divine, the outrageous drag queen and icon of counterculture, in a dark comedy called Polyester. To some, it sounded like mockery. To Tab, it was liberation. The film was a surprise success, hailed in the indie world as daring, bizarre, and unforgettable. Audiences who hadn't thought of Tab Hunter in years suddenly saw him in a new light, not as Hollywood's fallen golden boy, but as a man unafraid to reinvent himself. The performance reignited his career, not in the mainstream studios that once betrayed him, but in a corner of cinema that embraced authenticity. Tab described working with Waters and Divine as one of the most freeing experiences of his life. For the first time, he wasn't playing a studio-crafted image. He was simply himself, older, wiser, and no longer afraid of judgment. But his true revival came not on screen, but on the page. In 2005, Tab published his memoir, Tab Hunter Confidential. At 74, he publicly came out as gay, finally reclaiming the part of himself that Hollywood had stolen. The book was a revelation, raw, honest, and unflinching about the fear, betrayal, and hidden romances that had shaped his life. 10 years later, the story reached even more people when the documentary of the same name premiered at South by Southwest, cementing Tab Hunter not as a tragic figure, but as a survivor who endured and found the strength to tell his truth. For decades, Tab Hunter had been forced to live in shadows, guarding every glance, every touch, every whisper of affection. But in the final chapter of his life, he finally found what fame had always denied him: peace, love, and honesty. In the early 1980s, Tab met Alan Glazer, a young producer who would become both his partner in life and his greatest source of strength. What began quietly blossomed into a relationship that lasted more than 35 years. Away from the cameras, they built a simple life together in Santa Barbara, tending to horses, flowers, and the kind of quiet domestic happiness Tab had once believed impossible. For the first time, he no longer had to hide. With Alan by his side, Tab lived openly, no longer defined by Hollywood scripts or studio contracts. The same man who had been paraded as America's heartthrob was now free to be himself, unapologetically and without fear. In interviews late in life, Tab often reflected on his journey with humility. He admitted the pain of silence, the betrayal of those who used him, and the loneliness of years spent hiding his truth. But he also expressed gratitude for the love he found, for the chance to tell his story, and for the changing world that no longer demanded he conceal who he was. On July 8, 2018, just 3 days before his 87th birthday, Tab Hunter passed away from a sudden heart attack at his home. By the time he closed his eyes for the last time, the world had changed. What once had to be whispered in secret was now spoken with pride. The very thing that had once been his greatest fear had become his final triumph. Tab Hunter's legacy is not just of beauty or stardom, but of endurance, resilience, and truth. His story ensures that those who came after him would never have to live in the same silence he once endured. Tab Hunter's life was a story written in contradictions. He was America's golden boy, yet shamed for who he really was. He was adored by millions, yet forced to live in fear of discovery. He was built into a symbol of manhood, while secretly denied the right to love freely. And yet, despite the betrayals, the scandals, and the silence, Tab Hunter endured. He outlived the lies that once defined him. He reclaimed his voice through his memoir and documentary, leaving behind a truth that Hollywood could no longer bury. In the end, Tab Hunter proved that survival is its own kind of victory. His smile, once manufactured for the cameras, became genuine in his later years, because it finally belonged to him. His story reminds us of a darker time in Hollywood, when image mattered more than humanity, and love had to hide in the shadows. But it also reminds us that truth, no matter how long it takes, will always find its way to the light. Tab Hunter's greatest role was not the characters he played on screen, but the courage it took to finally play himself.